I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Billy is my co-host, but he is not here today. So I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of what we're going to be doing. So today we have a show all about birds. And to talk about that is Anna Weiger, and she is currently with the UK Forestry and Natural Resources with us. And she is with the Kentucky Master Naturalist Program. And so we really appreciate her being here. But before that, she was the nature sanctuary at Raven Run Nature Sanctuary. She was the naturalist out there. So she has a really good understanding of birds, and she's going to be telling us about all things birds, how you can get those to your backyard. I'm talking a little bit about the backyard bird count and what that's all about. But right now we'll go ahead and let her start talking more about that. So Anna, if you want to turn your camera on. Hi, welcome to the show. We greatly appreciate you being on here. Appreciate you. I know you've done things with us before, and we greatly appreciate you being back on, and I'm sure we'll have you on again. However, let me remind people that if you do have a question during Anna's presentation, to just type them in the chat pod. If you are on YouTube Live, you can send an email to forestry.extension@uky.edu. And again, we thank everyone for joining us today, and really, really thank you, Anna. So appreciate you being on. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited. I feel like I'm having the best Wednesday ever because I have unlimited ability to talk about birds. It's all about birds today on From the Woods Today, and I'm so excited. I've been a bird person since day one. That was what got me into the natural resources field. And I just bought kind of our own little our first house, our first property, my husband and I, and we are working on making it more wildlife friendly. So I'm kind of doing the things that I'm going to be talking about today right now. I don't come from a place of experience and having done all of the bird attracting things. I come from a place of I'm doing it right now and messing some things up, and some things are working. So we're going to be talking about attracting birds to your property, to your backyard, whatever that might be. Whether it's a farm or a front porch, people have different sort of ideas of what a backyard might be, different situations. And then we're going to kind of go from that into, so now you have your own urban or suburban or rural bird sanctuary. What do you want to do with all those birds that you have now? What are some ways that you can get involved with bird conservation and citizen science? So it's kind of a two-parter today, but it's all about the birds. So that's our common theme for today.
All right, sounds great. Looking forward to your presentation.
All right, so I will go ahead and share my screen and just holler at me, Renee, if anything looks like it's not wanting to cooperate.
It's loading. There we go. Looks good.
All right, perfect. Amazing. So yes, so like I said just a minute ago, it's all about the birds today. We are talking about attracting them, improving habitat around your outdoor space. Again, whether that's a farm or, property, or just your, porch overhang in an apartment complex, whatever it might be, there are ways that you can improve it habitat-wise, attract more birds. And then we are also going to be talking about ways that you can be involved in citizen science efforts, bird conservation efforts, get out there and really be doing the most for the birds because they deserve it. They're awesome. So again, we've got kind of a two-parter today, and we're going to head straight into attracting birds to your space. First of all, part one, so you want birds. So I don't know, kind of about you all who are watching the show, but if you spend any amount of time on the internet, and I'm not proud to say if you spend any amount of time on TikTok, which I do upon occasion, then you might have seen the trend where people will play a recording of bird song, and then it's sort of nostalgic, and the implication is I miss when it was like this, and I woke up and I was a a little youngin and it was a Saturday morning and school was out and you could hear all the birds and where are the birds now? So usually sort of the point of it is the world is sad now, there are no birds, and there were birds when we were kids and it was better and awesome. Now we're going to kind of put aside all of our things that we could say about bird populations, how they may or may not be, decreasing, conservation issues that are obviously occurring that, you may be aware of. So, there might be some truth to that, but really here's a little example of one of these clips from TikTok, it looks like. So if you listen to the clip, sort of the background birds, if you're a bird person and you recognize bird vocalizations, then you may recognize that, we're going to progress past it, that bird is the mourning dove in the background that, sort of is the common audio that they'll play for these nostalgic little clips. And the mourning dove is one of the most common birds in North America. Its range covers most of the continental United States and also up into Canada and outside that area. And its population, I believe, has not really noticeably declined, and it has in fact grown a little bit over the past, 4, 5, 6 decades to be about 350 million birds in the United States, I believe, today. So this is not a bird that is gone. When we're kids, maybe we pay more attention to this kind of thing, but there are still mourning doves out there. You can still have this magical experience of, being out on the porch in the early morning or opening your windows in the morning and hearing the bird song from outside. You don't have to give that up just because you're, an aging millennial like myself. You can have mourning doves. There's still mourning doves there. You just need to bring them in. So you want those birds in your yard. You want to be able to open your window on a Saturday morning and hear some bird song. What do you need? Well, let's talk about bird habitat. We're going to start with, some really big picture concepts. I think there's so many great resources out there, and we are going to get into them about what plants to use, what feeders to use, what bird baths to use, all that kind of thing. And I'm going to let some folks who are have much more knowledge and experience, sort of speak to that. So we'll get into the, sort of particulars in a minute here, but big picture concepts with habitat. We might remember from learning in school, animal habitat has 4 components: food, water, cover or shelter, and space. Food, of course, varies from species to species. You might need some, grass seeds if you're like a little song sparrow there, maybe some insects. If you're a bald eagle, you probably need some fish, somewhere to go fishing, maybe some nice roadkill once in a while. Most every bird, just like everything else on the planet, needs water in some capacity for drinking. Now, some birds might need water because they use it as part of their cover and their food source, like the bald eagle that likes to fish, or like ducks that spend the majority of their time in the water. But all critters need, water in some capacity for drinking. Cover is something that can look a lot different for many different species, and winter cover is going to be different than summer cover. So if you are, a little American robin and it's wintertime and you need to find somewhere to stay warm and safe, then you're going to be looking for, a nice little hedgerow or something to hunker down in over the cold nights. And then when summer comes around, you might be looking for something very different to build your nest, maybe a nice tall tree, maybe the top of someone's deck. So cover can mean different things, of course, depending on the species, but also depending on the time of year, if we're talking about raising young, or if we're just talking about, sheltering from inclement weather. Space, that's just elbow room. That's not one that we think about a lot because it's a very sort of vague concept. But I always think about it in terms of a mouse needs a little bit and an elephant needs a lot. This is how much room, elbow room, the critter needs. And with birds, that can be a lot. Some birds, especially during their breeding season, are very territorial. And some birds are not. Some birds could be like right on top of each other and they don't mind. It just kind of depends on the species. So the last thing that we don't always think about with habitat planning and habitat improvement is the arrangement of the habitat components. So arrangement, it's just the spatial relationship between those components. How far would you drive to the grocery store? Are you going to buy a house that is a 90-minute drive to the nearest Walmart if you need to go buy diapers for your baby every week? Probably not. And animals are the same way. They need to be able to access all of the resources they need in a way that's compatible with the amount of area that they generally cover. So for a very small bird species, this might be a pretty small area. They're not going to fly miles out of their way to go to a bird feeder that is nowhere near any cover, any water, any shelter, and then fly miles back to go sit in their little favorite tree or something like that. So it is important to think about this relationship between the habitat components, because you don't want to just have one thing sort of isolated in an island of unfriendly territory around that. Now, you don't have to have all of your habitat components in one little area, whether that's your own yard or just kind of the area around it. Birds don't need all of them at the same time, and there's lots of different sort of life stages that birds go through, just like all wildlife, where they have different requirements. You don't need to have a large space to be able to provide important components of bird habitat. And the other thing that's great about birds is that they have wings. And so they are a little bit more able to work around like habitats that are isolated from each other, because they can just fly. If you're a little box turtle, or let's say if you're a little snapping turtle and the place where you're going to lay your eggs is on one side of I-75, and the pond that you live in the rest of the year is on the other side of I-75, those two habitat components are very much isolated from each other, and you are going to struggle as a little snapping turtle to make your way across I-75. So those would be, habitat components that are not arranged well. But birds have wings, so they can overcome a lot of that other animals that are more terrestrial may not be able to. And of course, tying into the wings, birds have the tendency to migrate. Not all species, but many birds migrate. They spend the winter somewhere else. They spend the summers further north. Sometimes they're just passing through Kentucky on the way somewhere else. Sometimes they're staying in Kentucky for the winter, for the summer, whatever it might be. There's, sort of different migratory patterns for different species, which we'll get into here later on. But rest stops are so important to migratory birds that if that is all you are providing in your space, you're already doing an incredible service to bird populations. If you think about, again, I-75, if you're driving for, 2 hours and there's not a Love's gas station to be seen, you are going to be getting very tired, exhausted, and cranky, and you are not going to have a good trip. And if you are a bird that's burning through those calories as you're flying, and you're just passing over sort of miles and miles of hostile territory with nowhere to stop to eat, drink, rest, shelter, that can be a contributor to bird mortality during migration for sure. So if all you're doing is having like a little bird pull off with a McDonald's and a Love's gas station, not literally, figuratively, for birds in your yard as they're migrating, that can already be an incredible, just boost to their ability to migrate into their populations. The last little thing here is to think about your area as the whole community rather than just your own particular space. So it's not just your front porch. It might be your neighbor's yards. It might be, the park down the street. Birds don't see our, sort of artificially constructed property boundaries. So they are going to be looking for components of habitat outside of your own space. Now, your own space is what you can control, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be looking at areas outside that space as possibly being able to provide some of these habitat components. So when you plan for what you want to do with your space to attract some birds, look at it with the components of habitat in mind, not just your space, but the neighboring space. But for sure, think about what you can really provide on your property. You know, if you have a front porch, you might be able to put out a hummingbird feeder, and you might even have maybe a nice shade tree in front of your apartment complex. Those two things together, you're creating, you know, food for hummingbirds. You're creating a nesting spot for hummingbirds. There's going to be some shelter in there. If it's, you know, a decently treed, that's not the word I'm looking for, a neighborhood with enough, you know, like trees and vegetation, probably going to be some bugs for them to eat. You're already kind of providing everything that a hummingbird might need to successfully raise young there, live there. You're going to be providing all those habitat components. Now, not every space might be able to do that for every bird. So again, if you just have that front yard or you just have that front porch and you're putting out a bird feeder, and maybe you have some you know, little space in front, and you put some bird-friendly native shrubs out there, you're creating a great situation for wintering birds to be able to shelter, to eat at the bird feeder. You know, maybe you're not going to have 50 million different species nesting there, but that's okay. That's still providing valuable habitat with just those components. So think about what you're really hoping to, you know, sort of get out of the renovation, the bird renovation of your property, so to speak, before you jump into it. There's lots of different resources that we're going to get into at the end to help you make this plan. So, you know, we'll kind of follow up on that here in a few slides, but just be thinking about, you know, what is your end goal? What are you hoping that birds will be able to get out of this sort of little renovation of your space? So an example of how to think about the arrangement of habitat components, because I think, you know, people do get sort of stuck on, I need to make my whole entire yard a magical bird sanctuary, and that's not necessarily feasible for everybody, for a variety of reasons. But look at and you can get on Google Earth if you want to, or maybe you're just really familiar with your neighborhood and it's sort of easy for you to be thinking about where these different components might be. But hop on an aerial view and see what's going on in your neighborhood. You know, say we live in the Dollar General in Nicholasville, Kentucky, right here. We can see Nicholasville, you know, this surrounding area, it's pretty suburban, it's pretty built up. We got a major road here, but we also have some things that might help us when we're thinking about whether or not this could be an adequate bird habitat for certain species. So say we want to put out a year-round bird feeder, but we don't know if it's going to attract anything because we're kind of right in the middle. We're in the Dollar General. We're right in the middle of Nicholasville. Now, if you could zoom out, you could see this a little bit better. I cut it off to be a little bit shorter, narrower than I should have. But you can see we actually do have some pretty decent sources of water around here. We've got a little, you know, reservoir there. We've got a little reservoir there. There's probably some more that we can't see from, you know, this elevation or this distance from the ground. And to be honest, a lot of the songbirds, they do need water, especially during the winter time when it freezes and during periods of drought. That can be a really big limiting factor, is availability of water during severe weather. But if there's a puddle in a parking lot, a lot of the times, I'm not saying it's the healthiest, but a lot of the times, you know, you'll see birds gathered around it, you know, using that as a water source. Again, not saying it's ideal, but usually, in my experience and from people I've talked to, water is not necessarily the biggest limiting factor for a lot of these like smaller feeder backyard songbirds. And we do have some water in here. We've also got, it looks like a field out here. We've got that right there, could be, you know, a little riparian zone. We've got a little maybe spring going through the field. We've got some nice edges, some nice, you know, shrubs, hedgerows built up. And we also have some throughout this suburban area that neighbors our little Dollar General home. So it does look like that we likely have a fair amount of cover. It looks like there's some right next to the Dollar General too, that these birds are going to be able to utilize. And then if we're putting a feeder by the Dollar General, we are going to have to be thinking about a little bit of cover closer to that site. But if you're looking at this from sort of the bird's eye view, literally, you don't necessarily have to have everything that you need to be a bird right there at Dollar General. Dollar General might be that for people, but it's not that for birds. But we do have these other surrounding areas that could potentially be useful when we're thinking about how we can get more habitat components into that space. Some of them might already be available. So thinking about what is feasible for a space. That goes back to planning and research. This little guy here in the corner is a sandhill crane. These guys, you never know where they're going to show up. They are migratory, and migratory birds are not necessarily always predictable. But if you are thinking of birds that you want to attract to an area, you are going to really struggle with disappointment if your goal bird to attract to Dollar General is a sandhill crane. They need a lot of space. They like a lot of water. They like, marshlands, flooded fields. They migrate in large flocks and spend most of their life cycle in large flocks. So this is not a great situation. All our sandhill cranes are not going to really fit in the yard of the Dollar General. And even if they were, they would eat all the food out of your bird feeders in 4 seconds. So, think about that space. Is there enough elbow room for a migrating flock of sandhill cranes here? Probably not, but you might be able to attract some of these cool little guys. Again, we've got lots of, little woodland, little buffer zone there. We've got a little buffer zone in there. We've got some vegetation in there. And then you're going to put some bird feeders up. And guess what? You've got some perfect habitat for birds like the tufted titmouse here, the white-breasted nuthatch, some critters that are a little bit more adaptable and fit into those smaller spaces well, as long as they're able to get the habitat components that they need. So this winter, if you're at the Dollar General trying to attract a sandhill crane, might be disappointing, but you're probably going to be pretty happy with the results if you're trying to attract, chickadees, titmice, cardinals, nuthatches, that kind of thing. So be realistic in your goals, I guess, is sort of the message there. So here's just a little example of ways that you can think about this. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit. So here we have a farm, and this is, for folks that might have access to a larger area, whether that's a workplace or whether that's, your own personal property, family property, whatever it might be. And our goal is to get some nesting bluebirds out there. All right. Everybody loves bluebirds. They are very popular backyard bird to try to attract, to try to have nests on your property. And these are birds that need a lot of conservation help. They are birds that have a population in decline. So we want to help some bluebirds. We're going to help some bluebirds. How are we going to help the bluebirds? Well, we need to be thinking about our habitat components. And a lot of these may already be in place, and you just have to make improvements rather than starting from scratch. So bluebirds are insect berry and berry eaters, generally speaking. They're going to need a winter food source. So we've got, we've planted some eastern red cedar there. And we've also got lots of options, lots of insect-friendly options on these little, hedgerows, borders, lots of stuff grown up that's going to allow insect populations to persist, which is really important for birds. If you are creating like a sterile lawn environment or even some agricultural fields that are, sort of harvested and planted all the way to the edges, you really remove that edge habitat that's great for insects, and as an extension of that, great for birds. So lots of different food options there. We don't need to worry about that. Water, we got a little spring in here in that little draw there. And then also, I have found that birds are not above sneaking a little drink from a livestock tank. A lot of the times they're kept open all winter long, and that can be a great resource for birds. They will definitely hop on over, especially during, drought and freeze periods of the year. They'll definitely hop on over and grab a drink from the livestock tank. So think outside the box, because birds don't necessarily like look at a bird bath and be like, that's my designated water. They're going to be looking at these resources as whatever they can find, whatever they can use, whatever they can get a hold of works for them. So don't be afraid to think outside the box when you're putting your little bird glasses on and thinking like a bird. Cover. For bluebird habitat improvement, cover could mean a few different things, but in this case, I added nesting sites as cover. That's the big limiting factor with bluebird populations. And again, we are going to get into ways to research different species and what they need. But the big limiting factor with bluebirds is nesting sites. Many people cut down trees with holes in them, dead standing trees with cavities in them that bluebirds would have used to nest in, before birdhouses were common. So a lot of the times, they can't even find an adequate natural nesting site. And if they do, the competition is very heavy with not only other native cavity nesting birds, but also non-native cavity nesting birds. So that's like your European starling, your house sparrow, all of those will try to boot out a bluebird as fast as they can if they see a nice cavity like that. So we're leaving our standing dead trees with natural cavities, and we're also adding some bluebird boxes. These are great because they're very easy to monitor. You can step in and intervene really quickly if you do start getting problems with non-native species. Taking that box over, if you get some starlings in there, you can go in there and take care of it. And you can kind of monitor it and give the bluebirds a little bit of a bodyguard situation and make sure that they're able to utilize that box that you put up. So we've got our cover in there. And then last of all, space. And this is another thing that you want to research for your species that you're hoping to attract, especially if you're hoping to attract them as nesting birds. Nesting birds are territorial. So they're defending a space, a physical space from other nesting individuals of the same species. This is not necessarily true of wintering birds. In the winter, they're all just trying to find food. In the summer, they're defending that nesting territory. So the average size of a bluebird territory is about 5 acres, give or take quite a bit, depending on the quality of the habitat. And this is about 5 acres, and this is about 5 acres. So we've got these sort of spaced adequately from each other. But also, if we were to zoom out, you would be able to see, that there might be the potential for many habitats to overlap, or many territories to overlap this site. So you probably could fit some more bluebird boxes in this site because, an individual could be nesting there, but their territory is like this whole upper right-hand corner. So, it's not like they're respecting these boundary lines and each having their 5 little acres just on this farm, but just for the purposes of demonstration, do be aware if you're trying to attract nesting species that they oftentimes are territorial, and they don't want to be like all on top of each other and a bunch of them all nesting kind of crammed together. All right, so let's go back to the Dollar General, except this time we're going to Bowling Green. What if you just want to attract some backyard birds and you live in the Bowling Green Dollar General? Well, guess what? You can totally attract some birds, even if you just have this little side yard here. Again, be thinking about your goal right here. We're attracting backyard birds. You may not have a spot for them to nest. You might have a spot for them to nest, but let's just focus for now on having a good spot where birds are going to be they're going to be able to feed and shelter and hang out, and you're going to be seeing some cool different backyard species here. So again, be thinking about those habitat components and thinking about how you are going to be providing them in this space. Now, if we zoom out, you can see that we've got a little bit to work with here, right, in our arrangement of habitat components outside just our little Dollar General yard. We've got this beautiful row of trees right here. We've got a field edge. We've got a little bit of a park or something right there, maybe, a tiny little bit of woods. So we've got some shelter that's coming relatively close to the edge of our little Dollar General yard here. So that already right off the bat is kind of doing some of the work for us. Now, to improve our own little piece of habitat here, we're going to get to gardening. And this is, sort of the long-term habitat planning for attracting birds in your backyard. This is not going to result in a million birds next week, but this is going to make your property so beautiful and so inviting for birds and other wildlife species a few years down the road. There's many great resources when we're thinking about wildlife friendly and bird friendly native plants. So we're going to put a little serviceberry. We're going to put a little dogwood. We're going to put a little holly. And these are species that are also ornamental. So most of the time, they're not going to cause a fuss if you live right in the middle of the city and you're planting them. So we'll put in some bird friendly, little trees there, little shrubs. We've already got some great cover on this southern little edge there. But we're going to do some planting because we're trying to improve the spot. And then one thing that is important to think about when you're creating this habitat is it safe for the bird? So when we're talking about bird feeders especially, so we're putting in a bird feeder, we want to attract birds, we want to have like a distinct area that the birds are coming to where we can watch them. So we put a bird feeder in. Now, bird feeders can sometimes become a trap for birds because they come in and they're attracted to the bird feed and they're eating and they're not paying attention. And at that point, they are vulnerable both to predation and window strikes. So be careful when you set up a bird feeding station that you're not creating essentially a trap for birds to sort of walk into unwittingly. So we'll go into it a little bit more here shortly, talk about some great resources for bird feeder placement. But we also put, we put a little nice little flowers here, some little switchgrass. We're going to do a little native gardening in here. And that's going to help us control some of this runoff on the parking lot and hopefully give us a little bit more clean water here in our little runoff ditch that we have there. But it's also going to be a good spot for birds to hop from the bird feeder into some undergrowth. If we have a hawk swoop in from the woods and try to grab a bird off the bird feeder. So you want to be sure that birds are not just sort of stranded out in the open if a predator does appear by where you place your bird feeders. And on the flip side of that, you also don't want to have them attracted to a bird feeder site where you're just like blocking their view from a bunch of angles, where you have undergrowth coming right up to the bird feeder, especially in areas that have a lot of feral cats. That can also create a really dangerous situation for birds because cats tend to use that undergrowth to sort of sneak up and approach the feeder. So you just want to make sure you've got a little bit of distance, but a spot that they can hop over to if they do see some aerial predators like hawks. Okay, so I promised those resources and we're going to look at them real quick. First up, All About Birds. This is published by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and you are going to be hearing more about the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Don't worry, because they are amazing. So they have this online site, allaboutbirds.org. It's completely free. It's an amazing resource because you can get on there and you can look up pretty much, let's say we want a bird. Drop a bird in the chat. What's a good bird to look up? Oh, I guess we have to be able to spell to look up birds, huh? This is going to be a great starting point when you're thinking about what birds do you actually want to attract to your property. Maybe you have no clue and you just need to start with a basic Google, like, what are some common backyard birds in Kentucky? That's okay. That's okay. Start your research wherever you need to, but this is a great stop for when you're really making that plan and thinking about, okay, I love cardinals. I think they're amazing, they're beautiful. I want a million cardinals in my yard every winter. I want more cardinals than everyone else. I want to steal my neighbor's cardinals. Get on here and look through, the requirements for, the food they prefer, the habitat they prefer. If you want to have them nesting, where are they probably going to want to nest? So this could be an amazing, free, detailed, and reliable resource if you are interested in, getting some background information on the species that you're hoping to attract. So next up, this is another amazing free resource that I feel like I don't see shared around enough. So I want to bring it to your attention because amazing, great place to start and great place to make your whole plan if you never end up using another resource. If you are looking for native plant information for bird-friendly plantings, bird-friendly habitat improvement, attracting birds, you need to go to Audubon's native plant database. You can basically hop on here, and it's probably going to take a little bit of a moment to load because it is a larger website and we're screen sharing. But this website basically does all of the legwork for you. So you can go on here. We're just going to put my email in. They do ask you for an email, but it's Audubon. Who doesn't want emails from Audubon? And they are going to automatically generate an amazing list to get you started, to get you thinking about what you might want to use in your native plant endeavors to attract birds to your property. You can see it sorted by best results. You can go in here and you can look for different types of plants. So maybe you are not allowed per your HOA to put any new trees up. Well, don't worry, because you can go on here and look up grasses, vines, succulents even, shrubs, whatever it might be. You can look it up by the type of bird it attracts, or if you just want to browse, you can look over to the right-hand side here and see, what birds might utilize that species of plant. And then when you're ready to make yourself a nice little shopping list, you can select, which plants you're interested in. And it's going to, over here in the right-hand corner, it's going to make you a custom plant list with those. So amazing resource. It'll send it right to your email. You'll have a shopping list of plants to consider. And then people ask a lot of the time where to get native plants in their area. Up there at the top, there's a local resources tab. And this has lists of folks you can contact for additional information and native plant nurseries in your area. Online native plant retailers around the country, there's a map. So get on here and check it out if you are at all interested in doing native plantings on your property for bird habitat improvement. Great resource, does all the work for you. You don't need to feel like you have to know everything about everything. You can just know a little bit about some things and then have that web address and you're going to be good to go. The last website that I want to point you towards, I won't hop on there because there's just so much to explore, and we'll go down the path of exploring Wild Birds Unlimited, and we'll never get off it. And Renee will be ending the webinar at 1 o'clock. But Wild Birds Unlimited, it is a store. I'm not sponsored, but they are also an incredible resource for advice, articles on their website, knowledgeable employees and staff members. If your interest is in especially creating a bird feeding station or nesting areas, absolutely check that out. Absolutely check that out. Great resource. If you have a local Wild Birds Unlimited to you, go talk to those folks. They know so much and they want to talk to you about best practices for feeding birds. They know it and they're gonna help you with it. So Wild Birds Unlimited, check it out. Absolutely. These are my 3 top resources when you're planning out, a sort of scheme to attract more birds to your property. So I'm going to hop back over onto the slideshow. Just load in there for us. And we're going to go real quick into the second part of our discussion today. So you have created a bird sanctuary on your front porch, your property, whatever it might be. Your yard has all the birds. And even if it doesn't, even if it just has some of the birds for now, even if you're still working on those improvements, maybe you want to get more involved. Maybe you want to help contribute to bird conservation. Maybe you want to learn to identify the different birds that you have in your area. Maybe you want to turn into a massive bird geek and join the ranks of the bird geeks. I highly encourage it. I highly encourage all of them. Step 1 is learn the birds. If you're not somebody who feels like you can just identify every single critter that shows up at your feeders, or appears in your tree out front during migration, guess what? That is okay, because there are resources to help you become that person. And the first one that I always recommend to people, because everybody always has their phone on them, and I'm including myself in that, is Merlin Bird ID. Merlin Bird ID is an app. It's put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It is an incredible free resource. Incredible free resource, very user-friendly app, great for kids, great for adults. It's made for adults, but it's very user-friendly. So often kids, I've used it in an educational capacity before. Kids can usually navigate it pretty well. And it's not just a list and pictures of all the birds that you might be able to see. It can actually help you identify birds if you are just totally lost. So when you open up the app, you're going to see a few different options. It'll just be this real plain sort of interface, and then it'll give you the options to do a sound identification, a step-by-step identification, a photo identification. This is a great one for photographers if you're always taking pictures of things and you never know what it is, or you can just browse. So the sound identification is a relatively new addition to the Merlin Bird app. This thing is incredible. You just record, you set it so it's listening for birds. It's not, this is just an image, so you're not really seeing anything. But it just makes a recording on your phone. And then the name of the bird pops up, as your phone hears it. And then it also creates a visual map of the birds as it's hearing them, as it's picking them up. So if you hear something super weird out on your property, go out there with the Merlin Bird app, and if it's a bird, chances are it is probably going to be able to identify it. I found it to be fairly reliable with the sound identification. A few mix-ups, but it's pretty uncommon. It's amazing. It's an amazing addition to the app. They have the step-by-step ID, which is, it just guides you through a series of questions. So maybe you were, you saw it out of the corner of your eye and then it's gone. It'll just go through a series of questions. What size was it? What was it doing? What were the, predominant colors on it? And then it'll give you a list of options that it could have been based on your location, the time of year, and the specifications that you put into it. So that can help guide you in the right direction if you just got a little glimpse of something. And then, of course, it's got the photo ID. You upload a photo on there, or, you're on your phone, so you just grab it from your photo album on your phone, and then it'll identify it for you based on that photo. And then it also has just basically a field guide to birds on there. You can go on there and look it up. This little bar there indicates when it's most common in your area. I know it's hard to see because the screen's small, but it's just divided up by month. So, this first one, American crows, you're in central Kentucky, you're going to be seeing them all the time. Barn owls, not really seeing them much at all. American tree sparrow, we're seeing them in the winter. So we've got them, up through March or so, and then again in the fall and winter, November, December. So this is just a great way to, scroll through, look at some birds, learn about the birds. It's got a little bit of identification information for all the species. And whoa, my slides, they're going out of control. And it's also very cool because they have recordings of all the bird songs. So if you just want to hear the song, you think you're getting pretty good at identifying American goldfinch songs, but you want to refresh your memory, you can just click on it, go to the American goldfinch page, play the song. Incredible resource. Highly recommend it, and it's free. You have nothing to lose, and you have everything to gain. Now that you can identify all of the birds that are attracted to your property, what are some things you can do? Well, fortunately for you, we are just a week or so out from one of the coolest events of the year if you are a backyard birder or a birder in general. The Great Backyard Bird Count is a partnership project between Cornell Lab, Audubon, and Birds Canada. And this project has been going on for quite a while. I don't know why my slides are like just going along. They're going along by themselves. But this project has been going on for quite a while. It became global in 2013, I believe, was the first year that countries outside of the North American countries participated in it. And it's really just incredible. It's basically a count that takes place every year. This year is the 16th to the 19th of February. And it's just folks going out and saying, hey, I saw 4 cardinals, I saw 3 house sparrows, I saw this, I saw that. They upload the data. And that's basically like, if you go to the gym and take progress pictures every month or something like that, every year it gives scientists this screenshot of what is going on with bird populations right before one of their biggest annual migrations. So late winter, all across the entire globe at this point, we get this big snapshot of where bird populations are at, where species are at, numbers are at. It's very cool. So last year, they counted 7,538 species of birds worldwide, which is just incredible because I believe there's around 10,000 species worldwide, period. So they saw like a good chunk of all the bird species that exist. And that's in 202 counties and 500,000 global participants. So this year, you can be one of those 500,000 global participants. And how to do that? Well, it's super easy. First of all, you choose your location. For a lot of folks, that's your backyard. Grab a cup of coffee, look out the window at your bird feeder, and write down what you see for 15 minutes per day on one or all of the count days. And that's just because that 15 minutes gives it a, it keeps the data sort of comparable across all the observations. So you know that no one's sitting there like for 4 hours waiting for the coolest thing ever to show up. Just 15 minutes, little snapshot of what's there. You can do all 4 days of it, or you can do one of the days. And then you are going to record your observations, and you can record them either in the Merlin Bird ID app, which is also, created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that co-hosts the Great Backyard Bird Count. You can use a printable checklist and upload it to eBird at another time. eBird is a website somewhat similar to the Merlin Bird ID app, which I know we're a little bit short on time today, but I do highly recommend you getting on eBird, checking it out. It's very user-friendly, great resource to learn about birds, and great resource to record birds that you see. And you can do that in the moment. There's an app for your phone, an eBird app, or you can upload a written checklist. You can write your checklist and then get on eBird after the fact and type it all in. Very straightforward. I'm making it sound a lot more complicated than it is. Both of those methods are very easy. And then if you really want to, you can go above and beyond, get involved with the Great Backyard Bird Count, across multiple years. Start a little bird walk that, you and your friends go on every year for it. Go to a Great Backyard Bird Count program in your area. You can submit your Great Backyard Bird Count experience story online on the website. You can add photos that you took the day of, and it goes into this huge, awesome photo album that they compile. Or you can even make yourself your own a certificate of recognition for participating, which I think is a lot of fun, especially if you do it with kids. I've known folks that do it with school groups, with their own kids, and everybody loves a good certificate, whether you're a kid or an adult. So they have that on the website. You can download it, put your name on it. document that you documented the birds, document that you documented the birds. So where can you learn more about the Great Backyard Bird Count? It's just www.birdcount.org. And if you are interested in this, but you're just like, I don't know, Anna, you were talking kind of fast. I don't really know what's going on, but I do like birds. You can go to www.birdcount.org/participate. They have lots of great info there, but I've also just noticed that they have a webinar that they are hosting on the 13th that gives you all the information that you might want to know about the Great Backyard Bird Count before you dive into it. So you can hop on over there, register for that webinar if you feel like you need a little bit more information and learn some more about the Great Backyard Bird Count. But I highly recommend it. I started doing it I've probably been doing it for 15 or 20 years. Gosh, I feel like I've been doing it for a little while. And I don't do it every year. I do it on and off, but it's always been an amazing experience. And it gives you an excuse to just kind of sit down and actually enjoy the wildlife that you've worked so hard to attract to your property or outdoor space. So absolutely recommend it. Absolutely, absolutely. So having said all of that, I know that was just a lot of bird stuff all at once. We covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of material. If anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them, or if I went past any of those resources too quickly, I can absolutely share that in the chat or out loud, whatever you might need.
Anna, what an awesome presentation. Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate it. Everything about birds, I just loved it. We do have several questions in the chat pod and some comments as well. And that a lot of people are talking about that cats that are outdoors tend to be major contributors of bird population declines. So if you have a cat and you can keep it indoors, that would be great, is what they were saying. And the question is, how late into spring should we keep bird feeders going?
I think really it's up to you if you want to keep them going all winter long, or all year long past the winter time, I should say. There's different schools of thought. Some people feel that, if they have their bird feeders out, that the overwintering birds will not migrate away from them. I don't believe that there's any scientific, sort of basis for that. I think the impulse to migrate is so strong, they're not going to care if you have the best backyard feeder ever. They're still going to head to Canada, but I would say the major concern with warmer weather, especially, and leaving your bird feeders out, is cleanliness. As it becomes warmer, disease that's spread by bird feeders can become more of an issue. All the birds are kind of there on top of each other, sort of sharing, food, sharing resources in a way that they're not normally in nature. So, just be aware of making sure that you use best practices to keep your feeder clean. And, I've known folks who leave them up all year round. It can be a nice resource, I think, for parent birds. I know if you're a parent, you probably relate to like eating on the fly, literally, if you have kids. Nesting birds, might appreciate a little bird feeder up all year round that they can hop over to and grab a snack on their way back to the nest before they, feed their babies, or, So I know that was kind of vague, but really there's no good answer. You can leave it out all year if you want to. Just be aware of, especially sanitation and hygiene. And also talk to the folks at Wild Birds Unlimited. They have some amazing thoughts, ideas, options for summer bird feeders as well. So maybe trying to attract things like orioles with fruit. Lots of different options. So can't recommend Wild Birds.
I can't remember the date right off of my head, but later this month we will have it's a National Bird Feeding Month. So Dr. DJ McNeil will be talking about that. So stay tuned for that and be looking for that as well.
Don't miss it. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, we have other questions too. Someone attracted too many birds, including European starlings, and now wants to know what they can do to their feeders. Do you have any suggestions?
Ooh, so that is a tough one. And it happens to a lot of folks. It's happened to me. If you're not familiar with European starlings, they are an invasive and fairly aggressive species that can oftentimes monopolize bird feeders once they find them and drive away other native species. And there's no really good way to like 100% get rid of them. There are some different types of like feeder constructions, like shapes and sort of ways that they're put together that make it more difficult for starlings to perch on them because they really are like a ground feeding bird. They're not super athletic and, able to do like gymnastics to, yeah, they're not dedicated like squirrels in that way. So, if you can, if you're having a big problem with starlings, I keep on just like deflecting everything to Wild Birds Unlimited, but they can be a great resource to check out, different feeder styles that might be like less starling friendly, and then really minimizing spilled seed on the ground. I found, at least in my personal experience, when you have a lot of spilled seed on the ground, starlings love that. They're going to be all over that, trying to, eat up all the delicious stuff that all the other birds knocked off of the feeder. So I do, just whether you can sweep it up, whether you can like go throw, something over top of it, whatever it might be, just controlling all of that spilled seed helps a lot in my experience as well.
Someone wants to know how far from their house should they place a bird feeder, because sometimes the birds were flying into their windows and she stopped feeding them because of that.
Oh, so that is, it depends on a couple different things. You may be able to mitigate that. You can get these UV reflective stickers. They've worked really well for some people, I've heard. Other people have not had as great luck with them, that break up the outline of the reflection in your window. And so the birds will not fly into it as often because they can see that it's like a solid object. There's other different things that you can kind of hang in front of your window that break up that reflection. But that can definitely be, when we talked about sort of luring birds into a trap with bird feeders, that can be a big concern, is are you just creating a zone for window strikes? And again, I'm just keep on representing wild birds, but they have some great, products that can help you mitigate window strikes to a degree. And I've also found, depending on like the situation as to where the birds are flying from to get to the bird feeder, it almost kind of having the bird feeder right by your window, I have found, this is not like science, this is just my experience, that almost lessens the fatal impacts or the impacts in general, because the birds have slowed down by the time they reach the feeder, or if they're flushed off the feeder. A lot of the times it happens because the birds get spooked, they flush off the feeder, they hit the window at high speed, and that's, where you get those window mortalities. But if they're so close to the window when they flush off, they really don't have any speed build up, to impact it, and they're close enough that they might be able to see, that it's really not a place to fly. You can even get those feeders that like stick straight to the window, and those are kind of cool. But talk to wild birds, we love them.
And another one about, what about squirrels and birds with bird feeders? I know they're really good at trying to figure out ways to get that bird food.
I don't want to say admit defeat, but I do want to say, you may not win the war, but you can win some battles. Sometimes it's worthwhile. This is going to be controversial. I'm gonna get feathers ruffled, but sometimes if you feed birds and squirrels at the same time, you can also like make everyone happy, and so you don't have as much like competition and destruction between them. There's no really good way. Again, like the starlings, there are some feeders that are like squirrel proof or make it more difficult for squirrels. I have not found anything that's truly squirrel proof. I found that squirrels will do anything they want, basically.
They will try their best.
Yeah, they will do it. They will make it happen. They're very determined. But if you throw down some corn for the squirrels that's easy to get to, and you're feeding birds, with a hanging or movable bird feeder, then you might sort of coax the squirrels away from bothering your more expensive bird seed, and lure them away from that.
Do you find that bird seed, like if it falls to the ground and it's not eaten, do you have stuff that comes up in your yard underneath that? So is there a bird seed that doesn't do that, or are they all kind of the same?
Ooh,
I would
I've
assume
had
they were all.
I've had quite a few things sprout before. I think pretty much anything can sprout, but a lot of the time, um, the issue is that, people will buy cheaper bird food, which totally understand, completely understand, that it has a lot of filler seed in it. So that's like your millet, your milo, and birds don't really care about that as much. It's not, as palatable to them, and so they'll kick it off onto the ground, and then it covers the ground, and then you have like millet sprouting all over your yard.
Mhm.
If you use just a seed mix that has only more desirable seeds in it, like black oil sunflower, striped sunflower, safflower, birds are going to eat the majority of those seeds and not leave any behind to sprout. So just getting a really high quality mix can definitely eliminate some of the extra, seed
Right.
sprouting and the waste and the starlings as well, because there's less stuff on the ground, kind of to attract them.
We have went the full hour, so I appreciate you, Anna. Thank you so much for teaching us all about birds and the great backyard bird count. We really appreciate you joining us and being on. And for you all, I really appreciate you being on with us. Make sure to check us out on fromthewoodstoday.com. You can rewatch Anna in about a week if you want, and get all of those great details that she gave us. So we greatly appreciate you joining us again, and we will see you next week. Take care. Bye.
For sure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Renee.
Thanks.
From the woods today.